What happens when two basketball legends step off the court and face their deepest fears? Subscribe to the channel and comment below where you're watching before you find out. I'm sending you to Miami. As the sun gently set over the horizon in Miami, the humid air carried by the wind filtered through the palm trees at the final holes of the Biltmore golf course. The crowd had long since dispersed, leaving only a few staff members and the faint hum of golf carts in the distance. In the gentle calm of the late afternoon, Jimmy Butler walked around the 18th hole, clutching his hat in his hand. A little further ahead, a familiar silhouette caught his eye. It was Michael Jordan, with his profile turned toward him. He was slowly walking across the grass with his hands in his pockets. It was impossible not to recognize him, even from a distance. His shoulders, weighed down by the years, were still straight. Jimmy's mind flashed back to years ago. He couldn't believe it. When he was a little boy in Chicago, the man he watched on television was now just a few meters away. Back then, Jordan was his hero, and the hero of the entire country. Now Jimmy was also a name. He too had played in the finals and inspired millions, but he still felt the shyness of his childhood. After a moment of wondering, should I approach him? Will I bother him? His feet had already made up their mind. He adjusted his cap, cleared his throat, and called out to him, increasing his pace slightly but not too much. "Mr. Jordan?" Michael Jordan stopped. He turned his head toward the voice and looked at him. He scanned Butler with his famous piercing gaze. Then a faint smile appeared on the corners of his lips. "Jimmy," he said. It wasn't a question, but a statement. "I'm very happy to see you on the court." They shook hands. The handshake was a little stiff, but it was the stiffness of respect, not rivalry. Jimmy had never noticed before how big Jordan's hand was. The wrinkles between his fingers revealed a few details that the screen had never been able to capture. The gold watch on his wrist was elegant, but not flashy. This figure was truly no ordinary man. "Mr. Jordan, can we walk together?" Jimmy asked. Jordan nodded forward in agreement. "I was already walking," he said simply. A few seconds of silence fell. It wasn't boring, but it was full. It was as if these two legends wanted to measure the thoughts that had accumulated over the years in silence first. On the horizon, a gentle breeze from the Atlantic Ocean had already painted the sky pink and orange. As Jimmy walked beside Jordan, he suddenly realized that the air around him resembled the magnetic field of a legend. Looking at Jordan was like looking not at an ordinary man, but at one of the most famous symbols of an era. "The field looks extraordinary today," Jimmy said, breaking the silence. "This place has always been special to me," Jordan replied. And he continued, "The gentle breeze coming from the ocean keeps you in the moment." They walked a few more steps together. A seagull scratched the sky, and the scent of the grass mixed with the light salt from the sea. Jimmy realized he loved that smell. Being on the field was one thing, but being alone with nature was a different kind of freedom for him. "Are you playing a lot of golf these days?" Jordan asked. "Yes, as long as the season allows. But that's not really possible," Jimmy said candidly. "Basketball takes up a lot of my time. Golf is almost an escape for me." Jordan nodded, as if remembering something. "Every great player should have an escape, of course," he said. And he added, "A place where the cameras aren't watching and the scoreboards aren't counting." The two figures passed by a bench but didn't sit down. Walking felt more right for both of them. Jordan's steps were still steady. Jimmy was watching how he observed the world around him. It was as if he was reading the golf course like a tourist, not like a book he had memorized over the years. He seemed to know all the slopes, every trap, and every curve. When Jordan spoke, his voice was slower and deeper. "I'm always here before the tournaments start. When no one else is around, of course. It's because this is the only place I can clear my mind." Jimmy nodded in agreement. "I have some rituals too. I go to the hall hours before the matches. Of course, being there when it's empty always gives me a different feeling." Jordan paused for a few seconds. A familiar sparkle appeared in his eyes. They both loved solitude because they were familiar with the silence before the noise. At that moment, a staff member who was passing by recognized them and hesitated. Jordan made a slight move toward a less crowded area. Jimmy followed him without saying a word. This was a moment of understanding between them, expressed through body language. It was a silent agreement between people who knew what it meant to be famous. "They'll never leave you alone, will they?" Jimmy said with a slight smile. Jordan looked him in the eye for a moment, and for the first time, Jimmy saw in his eyes not just a famous legend, but a friendly human being. Jordan didn't say anything, only a sigh, carrying the heavy burden of years, could be heard. They walked on in silence for a while longer. Neither of them wanted to break the silence, nor did they want this moment to end. It was as if they were suspended in a place outside of the past and the future. Time was passing slowly, but this slowness was not uncomfortable. On the contrary, it was almost like meditation. Jimmy turned his head and asked, "Why is this vast green space so special to you?" Jordan looked up at the sky. The sunset over the ocean had turned a deep shade of purple and blue. "I told you, I always come here before tournaments," he said, "and when no one else is around. The silence here allows me to hear my own thoughts." They paused for a moment. The breeze gently swayed the palm trees. Jimmy finally understood that this was where Jordan found himself. For Jordan, golf was not just a game, it was also a form of therapy. "You're right, I told you too. I go to the gym before everyone else," said Jimmy. "When the court is empty, and not even a ball hits the backboard. It's like taking a breath." Jordan looked at him, this time with a sparkle in his eyes. He agreed with him. The silence between them was no longer a wall, but a bond that had finally formed. "I'm glad you understand me," said Jordan. They continued walking. Now both of their steps were slower but more rhythmic. Two giants, two different generations, and two peaks, but similar loneliness. A little later, Jordan asked, "Do you still play golf?" Jimmy laughed. "I said I would, if the season allows. But sometimes I just go out on the court to get away. Basketball is very consuming. Golf is like breathing to me." Jordan shook his head again. Every great player needs a place to escape to. A place where there are no scoreboards, no commentators, no one expecting anything from you. These words struck Jimmy deeply once again, because he had experienced it too. Sometimes, even at the height of victory, there was an emptiness echoing inside him. Sometimes even victory came alone. Silence fell again, but this time it was a comforting silence. Neither of them weighed their words, just continuing to walk in the comfort of their presence. Then Jordan stopped for a moment. He looked into the distance. "You know, Jimmy," he said, "the hardest thing for me was dealing with being Michael Jordan." Jimmy was startled. It was the first time Jordan had ever used his name in such a personal way. "What do you mean?" he asked. "The thing is, people always create a version of you. They turn you into a legend. They turn you into a mascot, but no one ever sees the person behind the mask. At the end of the day, you're still just a guy trying to play basketball." Jimmy nodded. He wasn't unfamiliar with that feeling. It was as if everyone expected something from Jimmy Butler, but no one really cared to ask who Jimmy really was. Actually, sometimes I think, is that me playing on the court? Or is it the Jimmy Butler that people want to see? At that moment, Jordan's smile was not an answer, but an affirmation. "So you feel that way too," he said. "Then I guess you're ready." Ready for what? To talk about the truth. Those words surprised Jimmy and made him think. Was what they were experiencing right now really more than just a conversation? Was it a transition? A silent passing of the torch from one legend to another? They continued walking. The sun had almost completely set, and the sky was dark shades of purple and blue. Automatic lights slowly began to illuminate the golf course. The light mingling with the shadows created a dramatic glow on their faces. Jordan paused slightly. "Do you remember the 2016 finals?" he asked, turning to Jimmy. "When you were up 3-1 and lost, how did you feel?" Jimmy lowered his head. He couldn't forget those days. "It felt like I didn't just lose a game, but a version of myself. Like, I let myself down." Jordan looked off into the distance. 1995. We lost to Orlando. I had just come back. I thought I was ready, but I wasn't. But that loss reborn me. Jimmy listened intently, because that sentence was proof of how pain could turn into strength. "That summer I worked while everyone else slept. During the day, I was on the Space Jam set. At night, I was in the gym. That loss fueled me." Jimmy nodded in agreement. "I did the same. After losing, I rebuilt myself. I came back as a more determined, more hungry Jimmy." Jordan paused for a moment. His expression grew serious. But no one tells you how heavy that burden is. It's not just about winning. It's about representing an era, an expectation. Jimmy took a deep breath. He had never spoken so openly with someone like this before. In Miami, everyone expects me to be the savior. Every game, every second. But sometimes I just want to play, quietly. Jordan narrowed his eyes. He wasn't just hearing Jimmy's words anymore. He was feeling them. In Chicago, I was the one. Everyone saw me as the savior. But sometimes, you just want to be human. Jimmy's heart trembled, because this was a feeling he couldn't put into words. But Jordan understood him. No words were needed. They kept walking. They glided silently through the dark curves of the golf course. There wasn't a single human sound around them, only the familiar rustling of the wind, carrying the salty air from the ocean and scattering it over the grass. After a while, Jordan stopped. He planted his feet in the grass and looked out at the horizon. I learned in Washington, he said. I wasn't the same old Michael anymore. My body wasn't responding the way it used to, but that wasn't the hardest part. Jimmy was silent. He didn't want to break the weight of the moment. Jordan continued. The hardest part was losing your identity. When that unbeatable Jordan started to fade away, who was left? Jimmy felt for the first time that this question touched him too. If one day Jimmy Butler was no longer on the posters, no longer on the court, who would be left? So, how did you cope? He asked slowly. At first I didn't handle it well at all, Jordan admitted. Golf, business, a brief baseball stint. I threw myself into everything, but something was always missing. Jordan started walking again. Jimmy joined him. We're always taught to win, Jimmy, he said. But no one teaches us how to let go. Sometimes the greatest victory is to leave quietly. Quietly, but with dignity. Jimmy's mind went back to the 2020 final. That moment when he collapsed on the ground, put his hands on his knees and gasped for breath. He had given everything on the field, but he still lost. And that night, no one knew that he cried alone in his room. I ask myself the same thing sometimes, Jimmy said. Even if I win, why doesn't the emptiness go away? Jordan took a deep breath. The moonlight on his face made the wrinkles around his eyes more pronounced. Because that emptiness is always there. It's always been there. It's just silenced by success for a while. But then it comes back stronger. Jimmy nodded. I realized something too, he said. After I made the All-Star team for the third time, at the award ceremony, I smiled. Everyone thought I was happy, but inside, all I could think was, is this it? Jordan smiled slightly. It was a smile mixed with pain. I did the same thing in 1993, after our third championship celebration. I went back to the hotel, put the trophy next to my bed, sat there, and stared at it for hours. I felt nothing. Nothing at all. Jimmy's eyes widened. What do you mean, nothing? Nothing, Jordan said. It was as if the more I won, the further away the thing I was looking for was. You keep chasing it, but you can't catch it. There was a moment of silence. Then Jordan stopped walking. He took out a small bag he had hidden somewhere on the field. From it, he took out a simple but elegant divot repair tool made of stainless steel. Jimmy looked at it in amazement. What's that? It's used to smooth the grass on a golf course. But to me, it's more than that, said Jordan. It was my dad's. The last time we played golf, he gave it to me and said, true character is revealed when you smooth the grass, not when you hit it. Jimmy looked at Jordan's hands. That small metal piece had become a legacy in his hands. I've taken this to every golf course for years, to remember that we're temporary, but we can leave a mark behind. Then suddenly Jordan handed the tool to Jimmy. It's yours now, he said. I can't take it, said Jimmy. This is from your father. That's why I'm giving it to you, said Jordan. Some things aren't meant to be kept, but to be passed on. Jimmy reached out his hand. Though the metal was small, it felt much heavier in his hand. It wasn't just a piece of metal. It was a principle, a responsibility, a legacy. They sat down together on a nearby wooden bench. The wind blowing across the lake cooled their skin, and the sky was filled with stars. Jordan looked up at the sky. You know, Jimmy, sometimes the truly important moments are the ones when the cameras aren't rolling. Not on the field, but in the locker room. Not during celebrations, but in silence. Jimmy looked up at the sky too. Then maybe it's not about winning. It's about staying, he said slowly. Leaving a mark. Jordan smiled. You're starting to get it. Silence fell again. But this silence was the peace of understanding without words. No words were needed. As the stars shone above them, two legends shared the same truth under the same sky. True victory lies in permanence. Jordan sat up slightly and turned to Jimmy. I have a question, he said. If everything ended tomorrow, so basketball, fame, cameras, everything, who would be left, Jimmy? Jimmy flinched at the question. He didn't answer right away. He dug his toe into the grass and looked off into the distance, into the darkness. I don't know, he finally said. And maybe that's what scares me the most. Jordan nodded. There was understanding in his eyes. It scared me too, because we get so caught up in who we are on the court. When we step off the court, there's an emptiness. My name is Michael Jordan, but who am I, right? This sentence struck a chord with Jimmy, because sometimes when he woke up in the morning, he looked in the mirror and had trouble recognizing the person staring back at him. Behind the mask of the leader, the warrior, the hero that everyone wanted to see, there was only Jimmy. Sometimes I dream that everything is over, said Jimmy. I wake up and no one knows me. They don't know my name. In that dream, I feel both panicked and strangely at ease. Jordan smiled slightly. He knew that feeling well. I've been there too, he said. And that's when I realized that what matters isn't who you are on the field, but who you are off the field. They sat on the bench for a while longer. A star fell from the sky. As Jimmy watched it, he felt like making a wish. But this time, it wasn't a wish. It was a decision. Then Jordan asked, who do you really love, Jimmy? When no one sees who you are, who makes you happy? Jimmy gave the usual answer at first. My family. Caitlin. The kids. Jordan shook his head, but then slowly interrupted. That's the person you love in front of everyone. I'm talking about the love that no one else knows. The love that stays inside you. The happiness that only you know. Jimmy closed his eyes in response to the question. Then he spoke quietly. I love sunrise. Not for training. Just to and watching the sun rise in silence. He paused. Sometimes I love ordinary things. Doing things I'm bad at. Things I fail at. Listening to music. Drawing bad pictures. Just being. Without anyone expecting anything from me. Jordan smiled. It was as if he had been waiting for that answer. That's when you start being yourself. Jimmy nodded slightly. He was beginning to understand what he meant. Success wasn't an identity. It was a period, a temporary light. But when the light faded, what would illuminate you was the real person inside. They didn't speak for a while. Under the stars, the night sky had grown heavy, but they felt just as light. Those hours on the golf course were not an interview, but a therapy session. Then Jordan stood up. He stretched his back and rubbed his knee. Jimmy looked at him and smiled slightly. Does it still hurt? He asked. Every day, Jordan said. Especially when it's about to rain. This knee is like my barometer. Jimmy stood up too. My right ankle too. 3 serious sprains. One of them required surgery. The doctors said it would be difficult for me to ever play again. But you did, Jordan said. And you didn't just play. You changed the game. Those words echoed inside Jimmy. Coming from someone like Jordan, they meant more than applause at an award ceremony. Jordan started walking. Jimmy followed. In the distance, the lights of the clubhouse were beginning to appear. Night had fallen completely, but they knew their way. Golf is an escape for me, said Jordan, but it's also a teacher. In basketball, you make mistakes, but you can make up for them. With athleticism, willpower, energy, but not in golf. Every thought, every hesitation shows up in your swing. Jimmy listened intently. As Jordan walked, he pulled a putter from the edge of a bush. He must have hidden it there earlier, as if for this moment. They reached the green. The grass glistened in the moonlight, looking like velvet. Jordan placed a ball. He took a breath. A silent swing. The ball rolled into the hole. Jimmy watched in awe. Your turn, Jordan said, handing him the putter. Jimmy took it. He placed a ball on the same line. Just as he was about to swing, Jordan asked, how do you prepare yourself when taking a shot in the final seconds? Jimmy paused. He replied, I take a deep breath. I visualize the ball passing through the hoop. I try to block out external sounds. No, said Jordan. Don't give me the interview answer. What do you actually do? Jimmy thought. I try to control everything. My breath, the angle of my balance, the position of my fingers, the angle of my elbow. I calculate every millimeter to eliminate any margin of error. Jordan nodded. He had gotten the answer he wanted. You do the same thing in golf, don't you? He said. But that's not the real secret. Jimmy looked at him in astonishment as Jordan continued. Control is an illusion, Jimmy. True mastery is finding the balance between effort and surrender. This sentence opened a door in Jimmy's mind. He picked up the putter again. This time he swung without thinking, following his instincts. The ball glided and went straight into the hole. Jordan smiled. Did you feel the difference? Yes, said Jimmy. I didn't force it. I trusted. That's what golf taught me. It's not about being perfect. It's about letting go. Jordan took another swing. Then with a deep breath, he added, true control comes when you can let go. And in that moment, it wasn't just a shot for Jimmy. It was a realization. All those years of trying to control everything, maybe what he had really lost was his freedom. He had grasped success so tightly that he was now realizing that he had let the simple pleasures of life slip through his fingers. Jordan picked the ball out of the hole. He slowly handed the putter back to Jimmy and said, the swing is a mirror, Jimmy. It shows you who you are in that moment. Your patience, your fears, your confidence. It's all there, just like your shot. Jimmy nodded. Driven by an inner urge, he placed the ball once more. This time, remembering Jordan's words, he swung without forcing anything, guided solely by instinct. The ball came to a stop just beside the hole. He had missed by the narrowest of margins. Almost, Jimmy said with a slight smile. And that's acceptable, Jordan said calmly. Golf taught me to accept almost, to understand that not everything is within your control. Jimmy took those words in. In basketball, almost was often a nightmare. But maybe life didn't want such certainty. Maybe some answers were more meaningful when they weren't given exactly. They stayed on the putting green for a while longer. Then Jordan began to walk silently. Jimmy followed him, walking along the path illuminated by the moonlight. The lights of the clubhouse flickered in the distance. This time, the walk felt like an inner transition rather than an ending. Jordan stopped for a moment. He took a black velvet pouch out of his pocket. From it, he took out the small divot repair tool he had shown him before. But this time, he didn't hold it. He placed it in Jimmy's palm. This is yours now, he repeated. Jimmy still wanted to object, but Jordan cut him off, looking him straight in the eyes. This isn't just a piece of metal. It's a responsibility. From me to you. From you to those who come after. Jimmy stared at the object in his hand for a moment. It was heavier than he had expected. The tiny thing didn't feel like a weight in his hand. It felt like an oath. One day, it will be your turn, Jordan said, and you will be a light to someone else, just as I have been to you. You must leave behind much more than the field. Your character, your mark, your silence. Jimmy's throat tightened. He swallowed. He simply nodded in acceptance. They slowly approached the clubhouse. The road was forking now. Jordan would go one way, Jimmy the other. The time to part was approaching. Jordan stopped, turned, and extended his hand. They shook hands, but this wasn't the handshake from earlier that day. This time, it was the passing of a legacy. Jimmy, Jordan said, pronouncing his name fully for the first time. Be kind to yourself as you go downhill. The mountain still makes you who you are. You're just not at the top anymore. Jimmy's eyes filled with tears. He didn't look away. Thank you, he said, not just for this conversation, but for this awareness. Jordan nodded one last time. Then he turned and disappeared into the dimly lit road. His footsteps were silent, but they echoed loudly in Jimmy's mind. Jimmy stayed there for a while. The divot repair was still in his hand. He put it in his pocket, then looked up at the sky. The stars were shining. Then he started walking toward his hotel. His car was waiting for him, but before getting in, he walked over to a small patch of grass. In the darkness, alone, with only the stars, he closed his eyes, and he whispered to himself, maybe it's not about winning. It's about staying. Maybe it's about but what you leave behind in the end. Not just trophies, statistics, applause, but a silent strike. A piece of advice given, a heartfelt sharing, and a small piece of metal passed from hand to hand. Another star fell from the sky. Jimmy lifted his head and smiled. Have you ever wondered what success truly means? Beyond trophies and titles? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more untold stories of the best in the game.